Alapa friends. Really glad that we all had the opportunity to view that beautiful video before we speak, because many of the themes that Sahba and I will share today are related to those themes of the life of Baha'u'llah, the bicentenary, and the spirit of devotion in our communities. The efforts before, during, and after the bicentenary celebrations of the birth of Baha'u'llah have given powerful impetus to the efforts across our communities, and we are all keenly aware of the confirmations we've received and the changes we've seen in our communities. In this short period of 2 years, we've passed beyond something that which we don't return. The way we see our communities, our conversations, our holy days, our concentric circles are so broad now. The Universal House of Justice describes our community now, this global Baha'i community, as more conscious than ever before of its mission. It has experienced an unprecedented surge in its capacity to bring friends and acquaintances into contact with its community life, to inspire neighbourhoods and villages into unified endeavour, to articulate how spiritual truths can be translated into sustained practical action, and above all, to converse not only about the teachings that will build the world anew, but about the one who taught them, Baha'u'llah. This year, as we know, marks another truly unique period in the collective life of humanity. And in very short 6 months from now, in every land and across diverse settings, multitudes of people will celebrate the bicentenary anniversary of the birth of the Bab, the herald of that great personage whose advent humanity has been longing for. What we are observing is that our efforts are gradually forming a pattern of collective action and endeavour that is characterised by commitment for service and an attraction for worship. And it brings together these in a very coherent manner, the spiritual and the material, the mystical and the physical. We know that we are being called on to see in our endeavours the creation of a new pattern of how society can be. This is so exciting and such a bounty that we get to be part of this. Taken in its entirety, that pattern fosters capacity for service. And we've touched on that already today, through the education of young generations, for the empowerment of youth, for the spiritual education of children, for the enhancement of the capacity to draw upon the influence of the Word of God, which those beautiful friends in the video referred to again and again, how we accompany others into the field of service, and for the social and economic development of a people in the light of the divine teachings for this age, drawing on the words of the two beloved counsellors and our National Assembly member this morning. Essential to this pattern that we're trying to establish in every neighbourhood and community and cluster and country around the world, essential to that pattern is the devotional meeting. This communal aspect of the godly life is not only the greatest opportunity for our communities to worship our Almighty, and we seek His benediction in our own life, but this is also the most greatest opportunity to extend to our fellow citizens the spiritual energies of prayer. We can kindle in their hearts faith in the confirmations of God. We can restore for them the purity of worship. And we can strengthen in them as well as ourselves an eagerness to serve humanity. In holding and partaking these gatherings dedicated to prayer that we hold all throughout the world, we're not only igniting countless beacons of light in this gloomy world, but we are planting the seeds of future houses of worship, of Mashriqu'l-Adhkár. And the Mashriqu'l-Adhkár, the institution of the house of worship, weds two essential, inseparable aspects of Baha'i life: worship and service. And the union of these two is also reflected in the coherence that exists among the community building features of the plan we are all serving in obedience to our beloved Universal House of Justice. And particularly the burgeoning of a devotional spirit that finds expression in gatherings for prayer and an educational process that builds capacity for service to humanity. And these two are inseparable. As potent and far-reaching as are the spiritual forces released by individual and collective devotions offered, and we know they are so potent, but they are, and as essential as a vibrant devotional life is to one's own spiritual development, worship must also result in service. And the House of Justice notes that deeds that give outward expression to that inner transformation is what we want to see. So Shoghi Effendi points out that the very purpose of our communities that we are trying to build is a community that is divinely ordained, organically united, clear-visioned, vibrant with life, and is regulated by the twin directing principles of the worship of God and service to one's fellow men. We read that Baha'i worship, however exalted in its conception, however passionate in fervour, can never hope to achieve beyond the meagre and often transitory results produced by the contemplations of the ascetic or the communion of the passive worshipper. It cannot afford lasting satisfaction and benefit to the worshipper himself, much less to humanity in general, unless and until translated and transmuted into that dynamic and disinterested service to the cause of humanity. And likewise, on the other hand, our exertions in the field of service will not prosper unless we are brought into close and daily communion with those spiritual forces that are released only through prayer and meditation. So the nature of this divine institution, the Mashriqu'l-Adhkár, has profound implications for the spiritual regeneration of humanity. And as we approach the bicentennial celebrations of the birth of the Bab, we call to mind the lives of our spiritual forebears, the dawnbreakers, those heroes and heroines whose very essence was the reflection of love and service. Their fearlessness, consecration, and detachment will allow us to draw inspiration and courage from the acts of service as they awakened mankind to a movement that revolutionized the world and that we have the bounty to continue contributing to.
Under a wide diversity of conditions, in virtually any cluster, it is possible for an expanding nucleus of individuals to generate a movement towards the goal of a new world order.
La comunidad Baha'i en Gran Canaria lleva años, está establecida hace tiempo.
Al principio era un núcleo pequeño en la agrupación pensando seriamente cómo podemos encontrar a gente de la sociedad que pudiera beneficiarse de la misión de Baha'u'llah para esta edad.
El portal sin duda fueron los prejóvenes, ¿no? Ellos se sentían tan identificados con el proceso, se sentían tan vinculados a lo que estaban viviendo, a los valores que transmite el programa, que de manera natural las conversaciones con sus familias pues se daban y las familias veían que algo estaba sucediendo. Algunos de los padres pues empezaron a acudir a las reuniones de reflexión con nosotros.
Empezamos a tener los participantes de las clases de niños, los participantes de los círculos de estudio en la reunión de reflexión. Empezamos a utilizar un lenguaje abierto, incluir el arte, historias, canciones espirituales, y la motivación aumentaba muchísimo más. Y el efecto fue que en cuestión de 3-4 ciclos ya la reunión se había transformado totalmente.
y ver a toda esa gente ahí junta. Están aquí hablando de su barrio y además lo hacen con un montón de cariño porque es donde han crecido. Quisieron de alguna forma devolver todo lo que habían recibido, ¿no? Y algunos incluso sintieron en su corazón que lo que ellos querían para su vida era servir a Baha'u'llah.
Para mi vida era ayudar a cambiar de vida.
Y entonces ahí empezaron a tener nuevas preguntas, ¿no? Que si queremos crear una nueva realidad, una nueva comunidad vibrante, cómo podemos compartir con nuestros vecinos, compartir con más personas, ¿no?
Y nos enfocamos hacia cómo aprender a elevar el carácter devocional en diferentes aspectos, ¿no? Cómo un espacio de oración va evolucionando en el tiempo y va generando como más impacto a nivel comunitario. Y cómo la oración ayuda a unirse también como amigos, ¿no?
Empezamos por abrir nuestra casa con nuestros periodos devocionales. No solo oramos juntos, caminamos juntos y compartimos muchos cafés y muchos tés, ¿no? Y realmente cualquier reunión se convierte en una reflexión acerca del momento que estamos viviendo o de lo que necesitamos o cómo podemos cambiar.
El carácter devocional de la comunidad ha sido elevado porque muchos hogares se han abierto, ¿no? Es como un sendero de servicio que es abierto para todos, ¿no? El amor que hay entre todos, que también es contagioso, y ese apoyo mutuo es una característica grande, y creo que se está haciendo patente un cambio real de cultura en la agrupación de Gran Canaria.
Nos movió que nos inspiramos, nos movió que oramos. Con toda la capacidad que se ha generado, miramos al futuro y pensamos el anhelo de nuestro corazón es cómo llegar a toda la población de un barrio.
Dear friends, how wonderful to be able to see these varied vignettes that capture this movement of individuals that start in small settings and they have this vision for transformation for their communities. And gradually the numbers become larger and larger. You know, how does the Canary Island experience relate to worship and service? And what are we observing in terms of development within our own communities? So we saw that in the Canary Islands, that transformation of the individuals and the community around them was seen in the spiritual development of the soul. You could see that people were praying together, they were meditating together, they were reflecting together, and also through their acts of service to their community. The hosting of devotional gatherings and the carrying out of the educational activities are building upon the foundations of Baha'u'llah's New World Order that have already been laid. And what we're being asked to do is to build the structure on this foundation, the structures that support the civilization building process. No? There we go. You know, we've looked at this passage from Baha'u'llah a few times this morning. And it's good to remind ourselves that this whole process that we've embarked upon in creating the world anew is about transformation of the individual and the collective. And so now we're able to discern this transformative process in every setting that we're living and serving in. In some, it's a small, faint glimmer. In others, you can start to see the intensity of its light shining brighter and brighter. So the outcomes of the collective efforts that we're all engaged in are allowing us to lift our gaze. We're widening our vision. It's being broadened. We're clearly seeing the path that's before us. We can see further afield. We know the destination that we're walking towards. We can see the implication of our actions on the well-being and the outcome of the communities that we're serving. And in turn, it's generating a movement of more and more people who are like-minded, that want to see change, that aspire for change, that yearn to see change. And they also yearn to contribute to that change. So we see that an important strategy has been highlighted throughout the course of the last few sessions is the nature of devotional gatherings, and how over the course of the last 18 months and particularly 2 years leading up to the bicentennial celebrations of the birth of Baha'u'llah, we've been able to really strengthen the teaching work and participation in the number of the activities that we're hosting. And this effort has been advanced by area teaching committees alongside local spiritual assemblies. And they're encouraging friends to host devotional gatherings in more and more of the Baha'i homes. We know that the devotional gatherings, as the House of Justice reminds us, are occasion...
Under a wide diversity.
No, that's not it. This is it. We know that devotional gatherings are occasions where any soul may enter, to have the opportunity to inhale the fragrance, the heavenly fragrance. They get to experience the sweetness of prayer. They meditate upon the creative word, that agency that transforms. They're transported on the wings of the Spirit, and they commune with the Beloved. And in that process, we start to see that by convening these gatherings, adults and children of any background, in any setting, evoke the spirit of the Mashri'l-Adhkár, that spirit where worship and service become as one. Now, if we think back, friends, to 18 months ago, and we look at where we were as a community, we had 119 devotional gatherings in the grouping of clusters that are represented by you here today. There were 607 participants 18 months ago. We move forward. Capacity has been built. Today, we have 274 devotional gatherings. We have 1,778 friends that regularly come together, engaging in the creative word and reflecting on their experiences and contributing to the betterment of society, to the betterment of their own communities. This is nothing short of remarkable. That means we've had over 100% increase in the number of activities and over 200% increase in participation. Friends, well done. Where will we be in a year from now when we come back? That widening embrace now is becoming known to us. So the frontiers are quite promising. Now we have to be conscious of one thing. Devotional gatherings, like any process, or like any other core activity, I should say, is a process. It's a potential portal of growth. It's a potential instrument for teaching. And as this process unfolds, it grows in complexity. So from the simple act of hosting a devotional gathering that many of us are accustomed to with our families, we can now think about extending them to our neighbors, our colleagues, our acquaintances, our friends. And as the Canary Island experience highlighted, the hosts of the devotional gatherings are not just sharing prayers anymore, but they're reflecting on the profound conversations that inspire and invoke a desire to serve. They reflect on Baha'u'llah's teachings. They introduce to the participants the opportunity to create vibrant communities around them, and they invite them to participate. She was sharing that every devotional gathering turns into a reflection meeting. They have a lot of tea and coffee. They enjoy their tea and coffee. But they also think about the times they're living in. And they think about what needs to change and how they can go about making those changes. So each of our efforts, whether you're undertaking a fireside on a regular basis, whether you're conducting a children's class or facilitating a study circle or animating a junior youth group, these are all portals for growth. These are all instruments for teaching. They complement one another. They reinforce one another. They're the means by which individuals who are invited to participate become awakened to the possibility that they are the active participants or the active agents of change in their own neighborhood settings. So now we look at what are the possibilities for us moving forward? What are we going to be learning about in the next number of cycles? So we now know, as we've seen from all of these examples, these vignettes that we've just been watching, we need to extend this wider. So the first relates to how do we extend more households to host devotional gatherings? This is something for us to reflect on. And the second relates to how do all the children, the youth, and the adults who participate in the core activities become connected to a devotional gathering? Now, the global experience is also highlighting another complementary strategy. Something that is emerging most recently is where groups of families are coming together. Groups of 4 to 6 families come together in a neighborhood, just within their own neighborhood setting. So maybe there's a Baha'i family and they've identified 4 or 5 of their neighborhoods and they invite them to a devotional gathering. But this devotional gathering doesn't belong to the host anymore. It belongs to the 4 to 6 families that are regularly coming together. The sense of ownership is given to all of these friends. They don't just come to pray together. The institutions of the faith that are serving that community prepare materials. They share with them potential themes that might enable them to think about the possibilities of how they can respond to the well-being of their communities. And then you start to observe that grouping of families are supporting one another. So we can see that the devotional gatherings that we're now hosting, they've never focused on the ritualistic form or the outer expression of worship. But rather, we're now focusing on the deeper issues concerning reality and the needs of our times. So the ability for us to think in terms of conversations is embedded in training and education. And so we know, and this has been shared today, that one of the most effective instruments that we've been given is the Training Institute. It's a gift. It's a gift from the Universal House of Justice to the world at large. What does it do? It's allowing us to reflect on the virtuous conduct and self-discipline that's required to be of service to our communities. It allows us to think about coherence and a pattern of life that emerges when we weave study, worship, community building, and involvement in other processes of our society together. So an analogy might help us reflect on this a little clearer. Unfortunately, I don't have a glass, but imagine I was holding a glass. Now, we know that it's not inaccurate to say that the glass is transparent. We know that. It's not inaccurate to say that. But we know that transparency is not the purpose of the glass. The purpose of the glass is to hold liquid. So in a similar fashion, in a similar light, one of the attributes of the core activities is to become a portal for growth. It's an instrument for teaching. But that's not its only purpose. The purpose, as we've seen through these vignettes and these experiences, is to build capacity so that we can be of service to our communities, to help us translate that which is written into reality and action. So how many of us have looked at the core activities as a way of building a civilization, an ever-advancing civilization? How many of us have looked at the core activities as a means of generating a new race of man? How many of us have looked at these educational activities as laying the foundations of the future educational institutions in our community? Allow us to think about it in that context. So when we start to look at the Training Institute with an eye towards society, we see that the concepts that are embedded within them build these qualities, they build these attitudes, they build the skills, they build the abilities so that we can be of service to our community. They become a catalyst for social action. They become a means for us being able to engage in conversations, both at the level of our neighborhood, but also at the level of the state or the nation on issues that are important to the life of society. And of course it supports us in our teaching work, where it's building our capacity. Think about the concept of transformation. You know, we've seen this. Every individual that's been interviewed in those vignettes is talking about transformation. And we see when you open the first passage of Ruhi Book 1, and we all know this, it says the betterment of the world can be accomplished through pure and goodly deeds, through commendable and seemly conduct. This transformation, this profound level of thinking awakens us to the fact that my actions have a significant impact if I reflect on it, on not only myself, but on those that are around me. And then what is the implication if everyone were to think about their goodly deeds, their commendable and seemly conduct? What would the community look like then? Or let's think about the passage from Abdu'l-Baha. Let your heart burn with loving kindness for all who may cross your path. Do we not see in this the fact that we're awakening the fires or the veils of prejudice to be burnt away? And so it's allowing us to see in a different context the way we view the Training Institute. So each of these books in the sequence is building certain skills, certain capacities. Now these are my own reflections on how the Training Institute is not only building a conversation for service, it's building the skills of service to our community. Look at the first book. We looked at it this morning. At an individual level, we build a habit of sharing prayers, of reading the writings morning and evening. That habit extends to us thinking about the conversation when the hidden words are introduced. At a collective level, we see devotional gatherings emerge. The practice is very simple. Let's go and learn about sharing a prayer with someone. So now we've learned about this, the conversation continues to unfold. We move to book 2. We reflect on deepening themes. From the deepening themes, we're awakening to some of the spiritual principles that govern human existence. And then from there, it seeds deepening gatherings in our community, spaces for deepenings. It seeds the ability to have discourses and our involvement in those spaces that we can contribute and provide the Baha'i perspective. The practice, a little more complex than sharing a prayer, you visit each other in your homes and share some themes. We move on. Friends, I know you're aware of this. Book 3, we become a teacher for children's education. At the collective level, we're thinking about the moral and spiritual education of children in our neighborhood and community so as to ensure no one is deprived. Why should my children benefit and not any other child benefit? That's not the way we view it. We start to think the practice is very simple. How can I start a children's class in my neighborhood? We move to book 4, Crisis and Victory and Reflections on the Life of the Manifestations, the joy and sacrifice of service, and how at a collective level this is reinforcing holy days. Look at the bicentennial celebrations. They've been transformed as a consequence of the bicentennial in terms of our ability to think. How many of us went back and did a refresher on book 4? And then the practices, we can start to host these holy days in our own settings with those participants and friends that we're inviting. Book 5, we become an animator. We learn how to develop the seeds. We plant the seeds of social action and build a relationship between the role of youth and junior youth in the community. And the practice component is exactly that of starting a junior youth group. By the time we get to book 6, we're learning about community development. But something here is actually being focused on, the capacity to be systematic. We're learning, what are my own personal teaching plans? And then we're learning, what are the plans of the institutions of the community that I reside in? How how can I support their plans? How can I mobilize my friends to support the plans in this cluster? And at times we're being asked to go and serve in clusters abroad. Look at the summer initiative. And then the practice component of that, obviously, is Anna's presentation and engagement in these collective campaigns. So we start to see that, as the House of Justice says, as we go through this sequence, devotional gatherings become this embryo of the Mashri'l-Adhkár, the local Mashri'l-Adhkár. As Councillor Mills shared, this idea of a local house of worship is just a function of time. It's only a function of time. It's a reflection of these efforts and our ability to express it with others in our community. They kindle the stirrings of the Spirit and ignite the flame of service. You see the dimensions of home visits coming to life as we visit one another, and the bonds of love are reinforced. And by the time we look at the other dimensions of the sequence, teaching has become a way of life. And this is becoming the reflection of worship and service in our very own settings. The concept of the Mashri'l-Adhkár is not only evoked, it's being built upon. It's now moving towards crystallization. Friends, unfortunately, the time has come for me to leave. And I wanted to maybe just conclude by sharing that really in the final analysis, these are all reflections of love. Every effort that we take is a reflection of the love and sacrifice that each of you are laboring in the field of service. And I wanted to leave you with these words of the Universal House of Justice. They say, how often did the beloved Master express the hope that the hearts of the believers would overflow with love for one another, that they would abide no lines of separation, but would regard all of humanity even as one family. They say, see no strangers, rather see all men as friends, for love and unity come hard when you fix your gaze on otherness. For is it not love of God that burns away all veils of estrangement and division and binds hearts together in perfect unity? Is it not His love that spurs you on in the field of service and enables you to see in every soul the capacity to know Him and to worship Him? Undeterred by divisive social constructs, press on and bring Baha'u'llah's message to waiting souls in every urban neighborhood, in every rural hamlet, in every corner of the globe, drawing them to His community, the community of the greatest name, Allah.